Hi everybody, it's crazy, it's Monday, and it's the day before the 4th of July, so you're going to hear a lot of popping and banging going on in the background because, hey, people are setting off fireworks. So, we're up to episode number 72, and we're finally made it from chapter 4 to chapter 5. So, let's get started. Welcome to chapter 5, where it's all about the visuals. When you play a game, the graphics are usually the first element to make an impression, long before you can form a more rounded opinion of the game based on the aspects like gameplay, story, physics, or sound. Whether it's a screenshot, a video trailer, or a printed poster, graphics is the one element that publishers constantly rely on to draw the public's attention. So it's only fair that we should look at this topic in great detail. Okay, Martin Uptis, I'm just gonna put him in the limelight. He does have a lot of good videos out there on graphics and building models. Check him out on YouTube. I don't have him in my description because, well, YouTube won't allow me to have it. So, but check him out. He's got some old works, and I believe he still has some new works out there. So give him a shout, or give him a look at. Okay, in a modern game, it is not unusual for the computer to spend the majority of its processing time in rendering the graphics, while game logic, physics, and sound typically take up only a tiny fraction of the total computation time. This fact alone should convince you of the complexity of real-time computer graphics. In this chapter, we will learn first how to work with the material, texture, and shading systems in the game engine, followed by a quick introduction to GLSL, that's the OpenGL shading language, the shading language that would let you further extend the graphics capability of the game engine, and conclude the chapter by showing off some of the more specialized tools and features that can be used in a game. Now, GLSL is, like a standard now. It used to be multi-texture or something like that, but it went to GLSL, let's get that out right, because of the fact that it actually works better with the game engine at the time. But it's just something, little food for thought. Okay, visual style. For more graphic artists, the ultimate goal of their work has always been photorealism. Photorealism means that the scene looks as believable as possible by replicating all the intricate geometries, light interactions, and surface properties of the typical world. While photorealism is a perfect valid goal for games that strive to achieve the most realistic graphics possible, many games intentionally employ non-photorealistic styles. Achieving looks such as a cartoon style, anime style, or even a retro 8-bit style is certainly possible with the game engine. With some slight changes in the content creation process, combined with a good understanding of shading, texturing, and lighting, you'll be able to create stunning artwork of any visual style. Designing for real time. For a typical computer animation, the rendering time is effectively unlimited. A movie studio like Pixar has hundreds, if not thousands, of computers working together as a rendering farm to make the images. Okay, yes, that's a fact. Games don't have this luxury of rendering time. Because games are interactive, there is no way to pre-render frames ahead of time. Games need to pump out many frames every second, and from a single computer, in order to achieve interactivity with the player. That means that preparing art assets for games is a bit thicker or trickier than for non-real-time animation, where performance usually isn't a concern. Art assets Art assets refer to any piece of work that is used in a game. It includes models, textures, animations, sounds, and even shader codes. Because games are generally distributed to a large audience with a wide range of computer hardware, you need to make sure that the games will run at acceptable speeds on different hardware configurations. This way, you avoid alienating people without top-of-the-line computers. Blender has support for switching between different shading modes to help artists create games that work with different generations of computer hardware. This will be discussed in detail later in this chapter. Modern graphics cards are surprisingly fast at pushing out high-quality images at astonishing speed, but you still need to keep a few things in mind when making art assets in order to avoid slowdowns. So now we're on to geometry. Geometry is the basis for any 3D scene. You can quantitatively measure the amount of geometry data in a scene using a polygon count, which refers to the number of faces, triangles, or quads in Blender's case. In a scene. Okay, the more geometry data there is, the slower the game will be. So, how many polygons are too much? Rather than imposing an absolute limitation, just remember to use polygons sensibly. Spend them where they are needed and don't waste excessive polygons on unnecessary parts that will not be visible to the gamer. In other words, if your character is looking at the face, you don't want the back of the character to be, fully detailed. You just want the face to where the character is looking at the camera. Or if you're doing a first-person view, you don't need to go detail with the character unless they go to third-person view and see the back of the character or the side of the character, depending. Okay? Okay. That said, today's average computer should be able to render 1 million polygons at an interactive frame rate. So polygon count isn't as much of a concern as it used to be. A high resolution model is smoother, more detailed, but is slower to process by the computer. Okay, if that's it's just your first time even looking at this book, please go back to the beginning and start over from the beginning of the series, because you learn a lot more at the beginning and you will gradually work your way into what we're working on now. All that information is in the description. You can get the book and get the files. Don't forget the files. Okay, the supported Blender object types in the game engine are camera, light, empty, mesh, and text. Non-supported Blender object types are curve, surface, and metaball. Okay, these objects will be hidden during the game. So in other words, those are things that you can't see, but they can interact with the game. Okay, now what we're going to do is go ahead and leave it off here. I'm roughly at about 8 minutes. I'm going to keep it kind of short because tomorrow is the 4th of July and a lot of people have a lot of things to do, so I want to keep this kind of short for you. We're going to leave it off here at page 5, materials and textures. Okay, and what we'll do is next week we'll start right from here, right from that spot, materials and textures, page 5 again. I'll put it in the description so you know. And we'll continue on from there. I hope you all have a safe and happy 4th of July. Till next time.